at, oh, I'm jumping ahead. I need to follow my script. This is NAMI Smarts for Advocacy. It's our grassroots skill building program. And in this workshop, we're going to help you cook down your lived experience into a powerful advocacy message that can be used when connecting with policymakers. We'll also give you some tips and tools to have an effective meeting with your legislator. So who we have on the line here participating in this, in addition to myself, are Zach. Zach?
Hi, everyone. I'm Zach Blevins. I'm the Outreach and Events Manager. I'm the one who's been emailing you a lot.
And Cindy.
Hi, I'm the Administrative Services Manager for NAMI. Welcome.
So this training covers a lot of ground in a short time. So to get the most out of it, we ask you to agree to the following rules. And the first is, if you could, I'm getting a lot of background noise. So if you could please mute your phone. We appreciate
webinar
There we go. That's much better. Thank you. So keep your phones muted until or unless you want to ask a question at some point. Participate fully, and you can put any questions in the chat box or save them until the end. Heather Strawn is doing the chat box function, so she will try to answer questions as they come up as best she can. If not, we'll address them at the end of the training. We're going to explore why advocacy is important and how it affects our lives. We'll talk about why your story is a valuable tool to change minds. Cindy will tell a powerful advocacy story in less than 2 minutes. You'll get resources to jot down your own story, and then you'll see how work it into a legislative meeting. And finally, we'll provide some tools to help you prepare for the meeting. We hope that you'll come away confident and ready to meet your legislators next week. We'll begin by talking about why advocacy is so important. It's because every American with a mental health condition deserves the opportunity for recovery. Recovery doesn't mean symptom-free. Rather, we think of it as the ability to manage a mental health condition while leading a full and satisfying life. Elected officials are faced with a host of issues and interest groups. Your personal relationship and a well-crafted message can make the difference in their attention to and support of mental health issues. Your story shows that mental health conditions are common and recovery is possible, especially when our needs are met and we feel valued as a whole person. Yet too few people get the care they need. There's an average delay of 8 to 10 years before people get an accurate diagnosis. Fewer than half of children and adults with mental health conditions receive any treatment at all. Finally, those who do receive treatment often don't get the types of services and supports that are proven effective. Without mental health care, we all pay the price. One way is with school failure. Students with serious mental health conditions have the highest dropout rates of any disability group. We pay a high price in unemployment. Few adults with mental health conditions get the supports they need to get a job and stay employed. In homelessness, over 1 in 4 people who are homeless has a mental health condition. In criminalization, untreated mental illness gets off. Our jails are filled with people who would not be there if they had the care they need. And lastly, without mental health care, we sacrifice our future to suicide. Every 13 minutes, we lose a life to suicide. So, what can you do to change the situation? Talk to your legislator. Legislators respond best to people they know who live in their districts. Hundreds of bills land on their desks every session. So a personal story from a constituent increases the chance that they will take action. Building good relationships with your legislators is important because they make key decisions about laws and budgets that control who can get what type of care, for how long, and at what cost. So your personal experience, if brief, focused, and well told, will support a legislative ask, which will save lives and save taxpayer dollars. Now let's look at the valuable role you can play as grassroots advocate. One reason people don't contact their legislator is that they think they don't know enough. But according to research, stories that help the listener stand in your shoes are far more powerful than facts and figures. Any lobbyist will tell you that real stories, if brief and sincere, are advocacy gold. They are one of the surest ways to gain support for mental health care and break the stigma of mental health conditions. Keep these thoughts in mind. Your story is always right. Your lived experience has value and meaning. You don't have to have all the answers, just a clear ask. You think about it, this is very empowering. Here are 4 tips for telling a story that will move your legislator. The first tip is to keep your story brief. We live in a world of sound bites and text messages, and legislators are very busy. So aim for a minute or 2. We all could tell volumes about what has happened to us, but you will lose your listeners if you give too much detail. Think about a movie trailer. In 30 seconds, you get the highlights and want to see more. That is the effect you want to achieve. We mentioned that stories evoke emotion are powerful. Use vivid language to place the listener in your shoes. Paint a picture of what you went through, what helped, and what life is like now. However, if your story causes you to cry, it will overwhelm others and they will shut down. If your story brings out emotion without causing you to tear up, you will move others. If you find your story hitting too close to home, focus on the parts that don't bring up as much pain or use language that allows you to maintain composure. The more you practice, the easier it will get. Another tip is to use positive concepts like hope and recovery, if possible. If your story doesn't have a hopeful aspect, someone or something that helped, then describe what would have helped or what could help others. Hope is a powerful motivator for policymakers. Because they want to invest taxpayer dollars effectively, they need to know that recovery is a real possibility. Last but not least, make an ask of your listener. This is a critical step that many advocates out. Thank your listener for hearing your story, then put them on the hook by asking if you can count on them to support your issue. If your listener answers with a clear yes, thank them for their support. If your listener answers with a clear no or a vague response, thank them for taking the time to meet with you and let them know you'd like to serve as a resource on mental health. Regardless of the response, plan on following up often and to politely build a relationship. This will help you gently shift opinions, or in the case of a supporter, help them become a legislative champion. Now we'll show you how these tips can be used to tell a powerful story with an advocacy ask, 2 minutes or less. Cindy will read a sample story from a family member's perspective, and I will track the time just to prove that it can be done. The story is told as if she were giving a testimony at a legislative hearing, but this basic format can be easily adapted to fit other situations. As you listen, keep an open mind. Notice your reaction. What moves you?
Hello, I'm Jenny Jones from Springville. I'm a member of NAMI Springville, part of America's largest grassroots mental health organization, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. I'm also the proud mother of a 23-year-old son who lives with bipolar disorder. I'd like to share my story with you and ask for your support of mental health services. When my son was still a toddler, I had a thought that no mother should have. I wondered if my beautiful boy would be in juvenile detention on his 16th birthday. He just did not respond the way other children did to requests, to routine, to daily life and love. As he grew, we never knew what would be broken, who might be hurt, or when it would happen. In 5th grade, my son's teacher said, "Jenny, honey, I've taught hundreds of kids. I know when a boy is misbehaving, and I know when something's wrong, and something is wrong. You just keep looking for help. When Andy was finally diagnosed with bipolar disorder, our lives changed. With treatment, he started smiling, enjoying school and making friends. On his 16th birthday, Andy wasn't in juvenile detention. He was creating art. Today, he's enjoying life, working hard, and making me very proud. My son is proof that treatment works, but not everyone gets the help they need. A strong mental health system will help children and adults get the right care at the right time. Thank you for meeting with me and listening to my story. Can I count on you to protect mental health services and give families the hope of recovery?
So, what language moved you? What really caught your attention? Does anyone want to share?
And I should mention I have everybody on mute right now, so if you yourself are not already on mute, I'm going to unmute everybody. So if you're not muted yet, that's going to create a lot of background noise. But if you do want to respond to the question, unmute yourself on your end as well.
Hi, Keith, this is Sue. I think the part that really hit me, and when I read the information as well, but when the parent, this young child, and they were wondering what is wrong, and that desperate, when we have a child and there is something going on, whether they're sick with earache or strep throat or a mental illness, you just want what's right for that child. So that's the part of the story, when I read it and then again when I heard it today, that I thought was very compelling.
Thank you, Sue. Anybody else? Okay. We're going to keep moving. Now that you've listened to the sample story and noticed its impact, look at the 7 steps checklist on page 2, which show the parts of a brief, effective story. We're going to review those 7 steps now, and you can use these later when you draft your own story.
And for any of these handouts, I should mention that I emailed them out to everybody yesterday, so hopefully you have access to those in your email right now. It was one of the attachments.
So I'll just briefly go through the 7 steps, but it's really, again, it's helpful if you just review these and kind of, it can help you if you're developing your own story. But first you introduce yourself, and that includes your name, city or town, how you're affected by mental illness and the issue in your position, what happened before you received the help you needed, what helped in your recovery or that of your loved one, or what would have helped, how are you different today, share what's going on in your life now, or again, your loved one, what is the need or problem that we want to have addressed, what will help others, and then make your ask. And we'll be talking about that in a minute. So once you've drafted your story, you can polish it up and use it as a foundation for advocacy. With just a few changes, you can target your story to different audiences and a range of issues. Your story drives the point home by helping the legislator understand what it is like to live with a mental health condition. Most important, by helping an elected official see through your eyes, your story builds a relationship. And building a connection is far more important than powering through a number of people or points, because a good relationship increases the odds that the legislator will act on your request in the future. However, we would like our meetings to make as strong of an impression as possible. Think about an effective meeting that you've been part of, especially with a legislator. And think about what could describe what helps the meeting work and what can lead to a disappointing meeting. Does anybody want to share, if you think about what helps the meeting work and what could lead to a disappointing meeting, share any thoughts about that?
You can also share a response in the chat box, and I can read it off as well.
Yes.
It just happens. And so what you need to learn and what's really hard to learn is getting yourself.
They keep on muting the whole thing.
Is that the only one we're voting on?
Okay, we're gonna remute the line again. If you take a look at your handout, making your case, there's 4 tips that were, and I'm going to review the first 4. The first one is to know your issue. Your policymaker will expect you to be meeting with him or her about an issue, not just to chat. And that actually is something that I've seen a lot of advocates kind of go wrong on. They get lost in a lot of small talk without getting to the point, which believe me, that's what your legislator wants to do. They're there to not to make small talk. So having clarity about your issue and what position or action you want your legislator to take is vital. The second tip is to know your policymaker. You can build a stronger connection and a more targeted message by knowing and understanding your elected official. Knowing your policymaker can help you choose what to say and how you say it, and it may help you choose who to bring to a legislative visit. Now, we can help with that as much as possible, but it also helps to just to get to know your legislator more than just their name and what town they're from. There's always information available, but also, you know, you can ask questions to find out more about what they think and what their perspective is. The third tip is to plan your visit. Meeting with your policymaker can be intimidating. Planning will help you feel more confident. There is another reason to plan. You may find yourself in a group meeting with a policymaker. The more people in a group, the more complicated the flow and the greater the chance of people going off message. Fortunately, the solution is simple. Prepare. Take a look at the meeting roles handout in your packet. There are 3 basic roles to keep in mind. The lead starts the conversation, makes the ask, and closes the meeting on a positive note. The messenger lays out facts and talking points to support the ask. The storyteller brings the issue off the page by relating personal experience to the issue. If you are visiting a legislator by yourself, you'll take all 3 roles. Going to a meeting as a pair is effective because the legislator forms the third leg of the triangle, which encourages productive dialogue. In that case, one person may take the lead and the messenger role, while the other is the storyteller. A larger group can make a strong impression, but it's important to have one lead to identify other roles in advance and to remember that it isn't necessary for everyone to speak. Zach, would you like to say a little bit about the planning that we're trying to do to make that happen?
Yeah, so as you all may have seen in your email inboxes, we've started email groups for all the Day on the Hill attendees that share the same legislators. This way you can kind of know how many other attendees share your same senator or representative, and you can have some pre-event communication and planning. So there's basically the idea so like one person could be reaching out to their legislator to set up a meeting, and then you all know to meet up on the day of the event, so you can go and meet with that legislator as a group.
So we hope that that works. We got that feedback last year because we had several legislators who had a bunch of people there to meet with them, and it wasn't. I know it was frustrating for the people involved because it wasn't very well coordinated. So we're hoping that by doing it this way this time that people can coordinate and plan in advance.
There are some legislators this year that I know have 10 plus people coming for that one legislator, while there's other groups where there's only one individual coming for the legislator, and I made notes of that in each of those email groups. So you just take a look at how many people are included on those messages and just keep the communication ongoing and to have better coordination.
We're also going to, by the way, have a list of legislators who don't have anyone coming, so that, you know, if you have a bunch of people going to see your legislator, I mean, you might want to still do that, but you could also then take take a legislator who doesn't have anyone. That would be wonderful. Okay, so tip number 4 is to make an ask of your listener. If you are talking to a legislator, let them know what would help others, and then ask them if you can count on their support. This puts them on the hook by asking them for a commitment. This will tell you a lot. If they commit, you have a supporter. If they say no or they are non-committal, you know where they stand and that you need to follow up and nurture the relationship to build support. Don't take a negative or non-committal response personally. Your legislator may be under pressure to take a particular position on your issue or may be just being cautious. Take it in stride and work to build a positive relationship. To help you see how these tips and tools work, we're going to demonstrate a meeting with a policymaker and 2 constituents. I'll play the senator, while Cindy and Zach will be constituents. While you listen, notice the roles the 2 constituents play and where you hear our tips and action. Also, listen for facts and a story highlight. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Hello, Senator. I'm John Adams from Spring Valley. We're members of NAMI Spring Valley, part of America's largest grassroots mental health organization, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We appreciate your taking the time to meet with us. We know you're very busy.
It's a pleasure to meet you, Senator. I'm Jenny Jones from Springville.
It's a pleasure to have you here. I know NAMI. You've always done a great job bringing up mental health issues.
Senator Walker, before we talk about some important issues affecting your constituents who live with mental illness, we'd like you to know that we appreciate your many years of service in our legislature.
Thank you. I've spent 12 years in public office now.
We also appreciate that as a doctor, you value the health of your constituents and have provided important leadership on the Medicaid health plan and healthcare issues in our state.
Well, I've seen too many people in emergency rooms with issues that could have been prevented for pennies, including a lot of people who needed mental health care.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Senator. We're here because we want to urge you to support mental health services in HB 39, the mental health budget. More families than ever are seeking help from our mental health centers, but with budget cuts, people can't get the mental health services they need.
I've always been a supporter of mental health. I was a co-sponsor on NAMI's parity bill, but it's going to be an extremely tight budget this year. There are serious revenue shortfalls, and we're still figuring out where we can find savings. We've got to get spending under control.
We understand, Senator. It's going to be challenging, but the people of our state deserve the opportunity to be productive and healthy. To have that opportunity, they need access to mental health care. Also, if we don't protect mental health services, it's going to cost us more in other places. When our children can't get help for mental health conditions, they fall behind in school and families struggle. When adults can't get treatment, costs shift to jails, emergency rooms, and hospitals.
Isn't that the truth? Like that kid involved in that police shooting. They're saying he has a mental illness. I can't believe those parents of his didn't do something before a tragedy happened.
Yes, there's a lot of speculation around that. I just wish the media would talk about the stories of recovery like mine instead of focusing on sensational news. I'm here because my life is affected by mental illness. My son Andy lives with bipolar disorder, and I can tell you that treatment can make the difference between despair and recovery. Today, Andy's living on his own, working as an artist, and making me proud. I never thought I'd see him experience this kind of recovery. But it wasn't always that way. Before he got the treatment he needs, I saw him in the back of police cars and held him in my arms after a suicide attempt. No child should have to go through this.
I really appreciate your story, Jenny, and I'm so happy to hear your son is doing well. Is Andy showing his art anywhere?
Yes, the gallery is representing him, but what I'm worried about is that there are thousands of others in our state just like my son, except most don't get the help they need. More than 1 in 10 youth and about 1 in 17 adults lives with a serious mental illness, so it's more common than most people think. Many of our returning servicemen and women are experiencing mental illness too. We need more mental health services, not fewer. It's an investment in health and productivity. If people can get the right care at the right time, they can be successful, like my son.
The people of our state need your vote to protect mental health care. Can we count on your support on HB 39, Senator?
You've both made some excellent points, and I'll keep them in mind. I know how important mental health services are, and I'll think about this as we're working on the budget.
Thank you so much, Senator Walker. We appreciate you taking the time to hear about our issues.
Thank you for meeting with us, Senator. We know your time is limited, so we'd like to leave you with this packet that contains a fact sheet and NAMI's other legislative priorities. We hope we can count on your support for them.
Please know that we'd welcome the opportunity to be a resource to you in the future. We'd also like to follow up and see how you intend to vote on our issues.
Certainly. Please give my staff your contact information before you leave so they can get a hold of you.
Thank you, Senator. If you have time, we'd also be honored if you'd have your picture taken with us for our newsletter.
I think I can take a moment for a picture. And please tell Andy hello from me, will you?
Of course, Senator. Thank you. That will make his day.
So just a few, that's the conclusion of our story. If you can notice how much was conveyed in just a few short minutes, and that's probably pretty realistic for the time of a meeting, a legislative meeting. And if you noticed about the roles that people played and the flow of the meeting, and if you notice the policymakers spinning the conversation in a different direction, and how the other people brought that back to what they wanted to talk about, was very effective.
One other thing I would throw in there that I don't want to go unnoticed that I think was done really well in that conversation is the offer to provide additional resources at that point in the conversation, and also to make the offer to be a resource in the future. And that's something that we're going to give you plenty of copies of when you get there on Day in the Hill. We'll give you plenty of copies of our legislative priorities, and we'll also have a resource table as well with different handouts about the different bills that we are talking about that day.
So you can turn to the Meeting Your Legislator checklist on page 13. This handout breaks down the steps of meeting a policymaker. The checklist has 3 parts. First is make a connection. 2 is deliver your message. And 3 is close on a positive note. Now, always remember to send a thank you note or email after your meeting. It's not only polite, but it will leave a positive impression and give you another chance to make your ask. So now we're going to talk a little bit about NAMI's top legislative priorities and where we can advocate for these. And again, you'll be getting all this at Day on the Hill. All this is also on our website, but the first is establish adequate, equitable, and sustainable funding for adult and children's mental health services. The governor has introduced a tax bill that has money devoted to state funding for mental health that we will be referring to and talking about. But we have that general principle. The second one is make changes to and preserve current protections in the Medicaid system to assure appropriate behavioral health services for clients. And that's important because 3/4 of all mental health and addiction services in our state is paid through Medicaid. And thirdly, assure timely implementation of key pieces of the new children's behavioral health system, including universal screening and workforce development. So those are our top 3 priorities. Do you want to open it up for questions or keep going?
We got another slide first.
Okay. All right, so we want to talk a little bit about how to stay up to date on mental health legislative issues. I hope that you all receive my legislative update, but if not, you can sign up for that. I think everyone who comes is going to comes to Day on the Hill will be signed up. But that comes out every Friday during the legislative session, and it gives you a good rundown of what happened with our priorities that week. And it provides a lot of resources and links, and you can, look at the bills, and it also always makes suggestions on actions. So it's, I hate to brag, but I really think it's the best resource for staying up to date on mental health issues in Iowa. And it's free, so sign up. What to expect at the Capitol I know for those of you who have never been there before or only been there a time or two, it can be a very intimidating place. So, and we've gotten that feedback. So we're going to do everything we can to try to help you make it less intimidating and to help people understand how things are going to work and what to do. We're going to have, what are we calling them, Zach? Experts?
Yeah.
People who are veterans at the Capitol, who understand the legislative process and how it works. And we're going to have at least 8 of those people, in addition to our staff, who are going to be stationed all around the rotunda in the Capitol to answer questions and to help you to understand what to do. So we hope that will help. And we'll also talk through the process and what happens before we leave, before we go up to the Capitol. Because, like I said, it's a little intimidating. But essentially, just so you know, Iowa legislators, for the most part, don't have offices. They just have their desk on the floor of the House or the Senate. So for the most part, when you meet with them either just out in the rotunda or in either the House or Senate lounge, and you have to send in a note for them to come out and talk. So that's the process in a nutshell. Now, we are encouraging people to contact legislators in advance and at the very least let them know that you're coming. And a lot of people are able to set meetings for a particular time and place. So if that's possible, I strongly recommend it, because then you have a lot more certainty that you're actually going to get to talk to your legislator. But sometimes the scheduling just doesn't allow that, and so you just have to do your best to try to get them once you're there. And then finally, I wanted to give a little bit of overview of this legislative session. So we started in January, the second Monday. And this week is the first funnel deadline. They have a schedule, a system of deadlines called funnels that they put into place to kind of force them to get their work done, for lack of a better description. And the first funnel is this week. By the end of this week, they have to have all the bills out of committee in the originating chamber. So if it's a House bill, it has to be out of the House committee. If it's a Senate bill, it has to be out of the Senate committee, whether that's Human Resources or State Government or Labor or whatever the committee is. It has to be out of at least one committee. The exception is taxing and spending bills. So Ways and Means and Appropriations, those bills are not subject to the funnel, but everything else is. So after this week, a lot of bills are going to fall by the wayside because they're no longer going to be eligible for consideration. Then the next deadline is going to be March 20th, which is the second funnel, and that is the date by which Senate bills have to be out of the House committee and House bills have to be out of the Senate committee. So they have to have passed one chamber and then also out of the committee in the other chamber. So that's the second funnel. And then there's a certain schedule for things that have to happen after that. But, and I don't know how many of you know this, but the Iowa legislature is a bit of an anomaly. They don't have a sine die, meaning a day they have to adjourn. Most other state legislators do. They have a definite date by which time they have to adjourn. Iowa doesn't, What they have is they have a time when their money runs out. So the per diem money they get for expenses runs out on the 100th calendar day, which this year is April 21st. So that tends to be the date by which we look for the legislature to get pretty serious about adjourning because they're no longer, I mean, they all get a salary, but they're no longer getting that daily per diem for being in session. So we're looking for, and also this is an election year, and in election years, the sessions tend to be shorter because they're eager to get out there and start campaigning, and some of them have primaries. So it tends to be shorter. We're looking for this session to be done by the end of April. In all likelihood, the issue of mental health funding is not going to get decided until toward the end of the session. This is part of a much bigger discussion about taxing and spending. And so we really don't anticipate that it's going to get solved before probably the last week or so. So that doesn't mean we aren't going to be talking about it. We are, and there's other bills that we are working on and trying to get through. But our main issue is probably going to be at the very end, which is different from the last few years, because the last few years we've had policy bills, complex needs 2 years ago, last year the children's system implementation. Those bills both passed pretty early on in the session, and both were signed into law in March. So it was a different timeline and timetable than what we're looking at this year. And also, just as a reminder, for those of you who don't know, in Iowa, both chambers are controlled by the Republican Party, and the Governor Kim Reynolds, is also a Republican. So it's total Republican Party control of the legislative branch. So just to let you know that you're talking with a Democratic legislator, and they say, there's nothing I can do about that. That's why, because they're not in the party that's in control. Now, that being said, I also want to say that it's quite different in the House and the Senate. In the House, there's only a 6-vote margin, so there's a lot more bipartisan cooperation and work going on in the House than in the Senate. It's a much 31 to 19 margin. So the Democrats really aren't as much of a factor in the Senate. So you might hear more frustration and more, like I have no power, I have no control, but what we say to that is, but you're a member, you're an elected member of the legislature, and you're important in that regard, and you're my legislator, so I want you to know that this is important to me, and I hope that you will take that into consideration in your committee work and your debate on the floor. So we just want to let you know a little bit about the political lay of the land in the legislature right now. So, are we done?
Open it up for questions.
Open it up for questions.
We're going to bring it down. Monitoring the chat box, so I know I've seen a couple of questions pop up there. But once we get through those questions, we'll unmute everyone. So if you have a question you want to tell us verbally, we'll take care of it then.
This was a great bit of input that kind of leads to a question. So one of our participants said, a disappointing meeting to me is when they, meaning the legislator, seems to shut down before you even get started. What I have found is sometimes I'm reading it wrong, or they might too have a person or family experience, but it is a very personal issue for many to discuss. How would you handle a meeting in that situation?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I think you have to be sensitive to the situation. What I do, and I encounter that a lot, and actually I do get quite a few legislators who do share their stories with me, but it's not always on the first time I meet them, right? It might be in subsequent meetings as I get to know them better. So if this is the first time you're meeting your legislator, and especially also if you have more than one person in the meeting, they're probably not going to disclose anything very personal. So I think the best you can do is just try to follow the steps and to make sure that they receive the information, that they hear your story, and that they understand that you are a resource for the future. And hopefully you can kind of get that in, not just you personally, although that's great because you're the constituent, but also NAMI as an organization.
Thank you. So then another question actually has to do with a particular bill that's not necessarily included on our advocacy materials. So I won't ask about the particular bill right now, but how can, it's a two-part question, how can people answer those questions if it's not information we've given them? How can we find out more if there's something we're interested in and want to know NAMI's position and talking points?
Well, please talk to me. This is Peggy again. I am happy to answer any questions. It might be that we have registered on the bill, but we can't talk about, all the bills that we're dealing with. We have to focus. So we may well have registered on it, and I might have some insights for you and some stuff to share. So please ask me. We also have our lobbying team, and if I can't answer it, one of them probably can. I really encourage you if something comes up with a legislator where you don't know the answer, to just say, Senator or Representative, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure if we have a position, but write it down and give it to one of our staff, and I will get back to that legislator. That is really important. Don't try and bluff your way through or guess. Pass it off to us, and we will get back to them.
That's for the questions in the chat box currently. Again, we have a question on the specific bill, and I'm just going to encourage you to follow Peggy's suggestion. Rather than, we could spend a whole lot of time going through specific bills just on this webinar, so I would encourage you to reach out directly to Peggy or info@namiiowa.org, and we will get it to the right place, and 515-254-0417.
And my direct email is peggy@namiiowa.org.
So at this time, if anybody has a question, I just saw another one come through. I will unmute people at this point. You want to read that one that just came through?
Yeah, this one is actually more generalized. What are some of the ways that we can deal with the Medicaid work requirement bill that is in committee today? How can we persuade the sponsors that it might be bad legislation?
That's a great question, and we definitely do have a position on anything that would make it more difficult for people to get or keep Medicaid benefits, because that's so important for our folks. So I have some specific talking points on that, but let me just say that it's sufficient to just say we strongly believe that any requirement that would make it more difficult to have or to get or to stay on Medicaid, which, by the way, is not welfare, but it is health insurance, we're going to oppose, because it's absolutely vital that people maintain their insurance coverage in order to afford their medications and their health care. The unintended consequence is people lose their coverage. They're often not able to work at all. So it actually has a negative consequence. And if anybody wants more on that, let me know, and I can get it to you. But we're going to have what we call palm cards, because it's a card that can literally fit in the palm of your hand. And we're going to have lots of also background information on these different issues available for you that day. But like I said, if you want to learn more before next Tuesday, just let me know.
And the last couple of paragraphs and what that can do.
I think that was somebody else.
Okay.
It's kind of hard to unmute everyone for the possibility of one person jumping in without getting additional background noise from other people. So if you do have a question that you don't want to type in the chat box, if you could just put your name in the chat box so I know to unmute you, that would be helpful. In the meantime, can you, Peggy, maybe talk a little about the schedule for the day and who we have speaking?
Yeah, you bet. We have a great day, you guys. And I just looked at the extended weather forecast, and it's going to be another cold and rainy day, which is just a tradition for Day on the Hill. But it's not supposed to snow, so that's good.
I'll take rain over snow any year.
Yeah, it is kind of a, I joke, but it is kind of a tradition to have cold and rainy weather. So we're going to have a really great day. We're going to start with another how-to lobby session. It's going to be essentially the same. It's going to be this, only in person. So any of you are welcome to come early for that and participate. And then we're going to get started with kind of an overview. We are going to have the highlight of our education is going to be 2 panel discussions. One around funding mental health and one around the children's system. And we're going to have 3 panelists on each, including Kelly Garcia, who's the new Director of Human Services for our state. So I think that those are going to be very informative, and people are going to have a chance to ask questions of the panelists. And in between the 2 panels, we are going to hear from Governor Reynolds. She is coming to speak to us briefly for about 10 minutes. And we're going to have some time for networking and connecting. Then we're going to have lunch. Then we're going to get on the buses and go up to the Capitol for our time with our legislators. And at 3:20, I believe, we're all going to gather on the grand staircase to have our picture. And we've had the governor, I'm not sure if she's going to join us for that this year since she's coming to our meeting, but she has joined us the last few years for that picture. But we're all going to be in that picture. Then we're going to all get back on the buses and go back to the Holiday Inn, where we're going to have a dessert and debriefing. A chance for people to ask questions, to share what their day was like, and just to kind of like debrief. So that's our day.
To add an additional note onto the group picture, when you're meeting with your legislators, invite them to join us for that photo. We're going to be inviting them all via email this week, but there's a good chance that they won't remember that. So if you give a friendly reminder to them telling them at 3:20 we'll be taking the photo on the grand staircase, we would love to have them join us for that photo. Peggy, one other thing I thought might be good for us to cover, can you just go over kind of the general layout of the Capitol and where we will be versus where other areas that aren't as useful for our purposes?
Sure. So we come in through the basement, the ground floor, which is that's where the secure entrances are.
If you can see my mouse on the screen, I've got it pointed right where we're going to be entering the building.
That's where the buses will drop us off, right, and parking, by the way, parking at the Capitol is awful. So if you're thinking about driving and being on your own, I would strongly urge you to consider just taking the bus, because you're going to get dropped off right at the door and picked back up again. And parking is quite challenging at the Capitol. So we'll enter through that ground entrance. We'll be in the ground floor, which is the cafeteria. And then we're going to be going up 2 floors to the rotunda. And there's an entrance to both the House chamber and the Senate chamber on that 2nd floor. And the railing, around the railing to the rotunda. And that is mainly where we're going to be during our time, although you can also go into either the Senate or the House lounge. I know a lot of people get invited in by their legislators. They get, their picture taken, and, but that's where we're going to be for the most part, is on the 2nd floor rotunda. And then we'll go back, the stairs are between the 1st and 2nd floor, the grand staircase. That's where we'll have our picture taken. And then we'll go back down to the basement to exit to get back on the bus.
Are we going to have the 2nd floor rotunda all to ourselves?
We are not going to have the 2nd floor rotunda all to ourselves. Great question, Zach. It's going to be a busy day at the Capitol. We know of at least 4 other lobby days, 2 of which are very much related to what we're going to be talking about. Lutheran Day on the Hill. They're going to have advocates from Lutheran Services of Iowa, which is a social service agency, as well as Lutheran pastors and lay leaders from across the state. And one of their issues is mental health funding. So that's great, as well as the Iowa Medical Society. It's their day on the Hill. So the rotunda will probably be pretty busy. In fact, the entire Capitol will be busy. I kind of joked, like, we might need to sharpen our elbows, but I don't really mean that. We don't want to throw elbows, but it will be crowded and noisy. So that's just something to know going in.
And the way that we'll be able to tell who all of our attendees are is everyone's going to have a name badge on a lanyard that we'll all be wearing. They'll be bright in yellow. The exception being those advocacy experts that we mentioned earlier, who might be a good resource for first-time advocates. They will have the same design and same name badge. It'll just be in blue instead, so you can see who from our group is there. We'll also have stickers for you in your folder as well for our day on the Hill. So I haven't seen any other names pop up in the chat box, so I think we can start to wrap it up. If anybody has any additional questions, I know Heather has put the contact information for our office in the chat box. Feel free to reach out to us. All of our emails here are our first name at namiiowa.org, or you can give our office a call at 515-254-0417. But thank you, everyone, for joining us for this webinar. I know one of the questions earlier was if this is being recorded or not. It is, and I'm going to get that uploaded this afternoon, and I'll send out a link to everyone. So if you want to go back and rewatch or re-listen to this, or if you know of somebody who is joining us for Down the Hill that wasn't able to join us for the live webinar, they'll have the link as well.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us. I hope it was helpful. We want to try to make the process as non-intimidating and accessible as possible. This is just one strategy in that effort. Please let us know if there's anything more that we can do between now and next Tuesday to make your experience the best it can be.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.